Hello and welcome to Rulebreaker. We're doing something a little different this time here on the show. It's our first podcast. We're going to talk about the top 10 games for new board gamers, and a few other little bits and pieces here and there. And we go off topic at the end of the show, where each time we're going to do one of these episodes, we're going to give you a recommendation on something outside of board games that we think that people who are into geek culture will find a lot of interest in. We also have a YouTube series based on teaching board games. We will also host this podcast, so if you prefer to see some pretty pictures along with the audio, check it out there at Rulebreaker Boardgames on YouTube. So today we're going to focus on games that we use these games to get people into playing games with us, people who don't typically play a lot of board games. So we're not going to be talking about grand strategy games, complex abstract games, meaty Euro games today. We're going to stick with games that are typically known as gateway games. Gateway games are basically games that are usually not too long. They often have very low rules complexity, are quite easy to teach, are fun first rather than overly complex, but they also offer a lot of deep choices for quite a low barrier for entry. The term gateway games is used quite typically throughout the board game hobby. So if you ever hear anybody talking about gateway games, that's basically what it means. It means games you use to get other people into other games. So without further ado, we're going to go straight in. We're going to talk about these 10 games. There are lots of different ones that you can use to get people into games, but these are the 10 that we recommend you have on hand if you're finding it that you need a new group of people to play with, or you're trying to get family or friends interested in board games, or if you're new to the hobby. These are 10 that you should probably pick up along the way in order to expand your horizons a little bit and get more people playing with you. So yeah, let's dive straight in. Number 10 is Love Letter. Love Letter is a very, very simple card game. It only has a bunch of cards. I think it's like 16, 18 cards, something like that. And what's so nice about this game is that you have a very, very, very simple rule set, but the most elegant part of this game is that each player has one card in hand. Instead of having like a hand full of like 5 or 6 cards or 7 cards, you've got one card. There are 7 or 8 different types of cards, and on your turn you're going to draw a second card, and you must play either the card you had before or the one you've just drawn. And each of those cards has exactly what it does written onto the card, and there's a certain amount of bluffing and guessing and reading the other players that is just really, really simple and a hell of a lot of fun. There's one particular card in the game. It's the most common card in the game. It's called the Guard. This guy is basically where you've got to choose another player, guess what their role is. Each card is a role, and if you're correct, that player's out of the game. And usually, almost every time I see a game where you've got player elimination, I would run away super fast, because you don't want to be playing a game with people and a lot of people are hanging around doing nothing. But in Love Letter, the turns are so quick, the rounds are so short. I mean, each round takes maybe 2-3 minutes max, that you're not waiting around. And it's such a light game that even the people who have been eliminated from the round are easily engaged all the time, keeping an eye on what's going on. Yeah, I think this game is best with 3 or 4. You can play it with fewer, you can play it with 2, but I don't really recommend it. You typically play to 3 or 4 wins is the winner, and you usually play for about 20 minutes. And to be honest, you can crack the game out and just play a bunch of rounds without keeping score, and it's just as fun, really. So yeah, Love Letter. It's a very nice, it's a very cheap, very simple, very small, very compact game that you can carry around with you, and highly recommend it for particularly new players. So that's Love Letter. Number 9 is a game that used to go by the name Ink and Gold, but the version I have is Diamant, and it's had a few different versions for different names. This is by Alan Moon, and it's basically a treasure hunter kind of expedition, Indiana Jones in the temple kind of game, where you have 2 cards. Again, similar to Love Letter in the way that you've always got only 2 choices. There's a bit of a trend there. And these 2 cards are, you either go further into the cave, or you retreat back to safety. And each time you go in further, a card is going to be flipped over, and on that card there's either going to be some treasure, like a certain amount, which is split evenly among all the players who are still in the cave, or there's going to be a trap. If a trap is drawn, it's okay, everybody's still alive. But if an identical trap is drawn a second time, everybody in the cave is killed. You can choose to leave as your action, and if you do, you take all of the treasure jewels, like the rubies and diamonds that you've collected on your way through, and you store them in your treasure chest. So you've got to make a decision of how long you want to stay in the cave. How long are you going to be there? How much treasure are you going to try and get? You're going to push your luck. You're going to stay longer than other players. It's 5 rounds. You do that 5 times. So you can, after the first couple of rounds, you kind of gauge how much treasure you've got, how many treasure other people have got, and you kind of know how long you need to be staying in there compared to other people. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like, Chicken, the game where 2 people in cars drive toward one another, and whoever is the last one to flinch and turn out of the way is the loser. It kind of feels a bit like that, except in card form. Something that's really good about Diamant is that it transcends the language barrier very, very well. There's absolutely no text on any of the components or cards. The retreat and go further cards are super simple to understand. I've played this game with people who don't speak English, and we've had a great time. So in the situation where you want to do that, break the ice with partners, foreign parents or family members or friends or something like that, this is a really easy way to kind of have some fun. So highly recommend it. That's Diamant, or Ink and Gold as it used to be known. Number 8 is a very famous game now. It's one of the newer games on the list. It won the Spiel des Jahres a couple of years ago. It's called Codenames. This game is massively successful, very, very popular. It's a word game. So one of the key parts of this game that makes it so popular is that it's a team game. People are split into teams, so if there's like 6 or 7 people, you split into teams of 3 and 4, and one person on each team is basically giving clues. These clues are based on a kind of a cipher of what each color of each card is going to be. There are about 25 cards out on the table, and each card has a word on it, and it's up to the clue giver to decide how to give those clues about which ones their team need to pick in order to successfully clear all of their codes. So I think it's 7 or 8 maybe words per team, and the first team to guess all of theirs correctly is the winner. What makes it tricky is the clue giver can't say any of the words on any of the cards, can't say more than one word, and when they give the one word clue, they also give a number, and that number is how many guesses their team have that are related to that word. Codenames is really, really fun. It's one of those games where people can kind of float around and join in mid-game. Giving clues can be very tricky. Like if you're giving the clues out, it's generally probably a good idea to have people who've played the game before do that for the first round or two. It can be a little intimidating at first if you're brand new to the game to be the one giving the clues. So maybe if you're the gamer in the group and you're trying to play with some muggles, you give the clues and get them to guess, and then after one game, anybody who's played it before can definitely take over as the clue giver, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun. There are some risks in the game, like if somebody gets a particularly unlucky guess with their clue, they can hit the assassin card, and this is only one card of the 25, which means you instantly lose, and that can be actually a lot of fun as well. Trying to avoid that, because a lot of the words are all quite simple, quite obvious, generally nouns, simple things that can be easily explained, but sometimes the words are very close together. Like you might have door and gate or something like that, and you might say your clue is entrance, and if one of those is the one that you need and the other is the assassin, your team are probably 50-50 on whether they're going to get the right one or not. It leads to a lot of risk taking, and it promotes a lot of talking at the table. It's a lot of fun. There's a timer in the box. We play with the timer because we played a lot, and it puts that little bit of pressure on people to kind of hurry along and not take too long, and it avoids people from kind of just labouring on and just having a long think about stuff. The game can really drag if you don't use it, but I would also suggest for your first couple of games maybe to not use it, to not put too much pressure, especially if the people giving the clues are new players. Let's say keep it an optional thing, but after a few games throw the timer in, add a little bit of pressure. It adds a lot of fun. So that's number 8, Codenames. Number 7 is Alhambra. Now this is a bit of an outlier on the list here a little bit. It's a little bit more complex than the others shown so far. Another Spiel des Jahres winner. It's in kind of an older game, but it's still pretty popular. It's got a little bit more going on than the games we've spoken about already, but that's not necessarily accurate. Once you've kind of played a couple of games, you'll see that there's not a lot really to this game. It's quite a lot like traditional card games that people will probably have played before, the kind of things like rummy and poker and that sort of stuff. The cards are pretty straightforward to understand. They usually have a colour and a number on them. And what you're doing is you are trying to get the most of each type of building in your palace. That's what an Alhambra is. An Alhambra is a palace. So there are certain phases in the game where, like, I think there's 3 score rounds where you're going to score based on what you've got in your palace. And you're going to score with each different colour building, and also who has the longest wall around their palace. The trick to this game, and the thing that makes it so popular, I think, is that you're collecting cards and spending these cards to build stuff, but there's a little thing where if you spend the exact amount required for your building with the right color cards, you get to take another go. So it encourages players to kind of hold back a little bit, think about what they're doing, wait for the right tiles to appear so they can build a nicer palace, but do it in the right time that they get an extra go. Usually chain up a couple of things, and that can be really satisfactory. It's just a lot of fun. It's probably the most complex game on this list, so I'm tentatively stuck it in here on number 7, because if you're playing with complete noobs, you might want to try one of the other games, but this one is really good game. It gets overlooked a lot, I think. I would actually recommend, if you can find it, just get the standard game. There is a big box version that has a lot of expansions in it, and I think that's a little overkill, particularly if you're trying to play with new people. I would try and get the just standard version if I were you. It's a lot cheaper, and the game is pretty good. It's really fun. So that's number 7, Alhambra. Okay, so number 6 is No Thanks. No Thanks is a tiny little game. It's a little box with a bunch of cards and a few chips in it. This is a huge hit with so many different types of person. It plays up to 5 players. Turns are ultra quick. Like, we're talking, you take a turn in a second, 2 seconds. You got a simple choice. It's take a card, the card that's there, or put one of your chips onto the card. Each player's got 11 chips, and if you can't play a chip on a card, you have to take the card. And each card is a number, and these numbers go from, I think it's like 3 or 4 up to like 35. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the lowest possible score. So if there's a card out there with 30 on it, you probably don't want to take that 30, because 30 is like a bad thing. You want scores of like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, as low as you possibly can. Now the trick here in this game is that the chips that you're using to not take the card are also worth minus points. So if you take a 30 that has 10 chips on it, that's only really 20, and the lowest score wins. So you want to be kind of playing chicken with the other players and like getting them to put as many chips on a card as possible before you take it. The other thing about this game is, if you manage to get a sequence of cards, like if you get 20, 21, and 22, only the 20 will count. So if you've got, you know, the 20 and the 21 and 22 comes up, other people are like, oh, we don't want to take this card, it's too many points. But for you, you actually get it for nothing. But then you might want to be the guy who's like, okay, I'll just put a chip on it here, and everybody around the table will know that you want that card, but they don't want it, so they're putting chips on it, and you've got to decide how many of these chips am I going to try and get off people before they get annoyed at me and they're going to take it just for the chips too. It's it's such a fun game to just play in a group. It is best with 4 or 5 players. It's grand with 3. It's that's the minimum you can play with, and the maximum is 5. I think at 5 is actually probably the best, because turns are super quick, and the more players you have, the more random it can be. Well, not random in a negative way. I mean, like, there are so many disruptions and choices that can happen before it gets back around to your turn that you've got to really got to get your turn right. It's super cool. Yeah, and like, it's such a challenge to get to know what people are thinking and gauge what they're going to do. It can really be good fun with people you know, and with strangers too. It's always really exciting. So yeah, no thanks. It's a game that everybody always underestimates this game. They look at it and they go, oh, that looks like such a dull little thing, but it's totally not. It's really good. So give No Thanks a try. It's great fun. Okay, and number 5 is Survive Escape from Atlantis. This is a very beautiful game. It comes with these different thickness hex tiles that represent an island that is sinking. So you are basically one color of meeples that are placed around this island full of like beach, forest and mountain tiles. And there are a few boats knocking around the edges of the island. And what you're trying to do is you've got a certain number of actions per turn, and you're trying to get your meeples onto boats and get them to safety on the edges of the board, which are like mainland or different islands or something like that. But there are also creatures inside the sea that will stop you from executing your plan. There are sharks, which eat people who are not inside boats. There are whales who tip boats over, and there are big sea monsters, and these guys just destroy everything in sight. So every time you take a turn, you move your dudes, or move a boat, or doing such thing, you also roll a die, and that decides which type of monster you get to move. So you can very meanly tip somebody else's boat over with a whale. You can eat a bunch of people with a shark. You can place a sea monster next to safety to stop other people from going that way and make them go the long way. And also, each time someone takes a turn, they remove one of the tiles from the island. So starting with the beach, all those tiles are gone. Then it moves on to the forest tiles, then it moves on to the mountain tiles until the game is over. And on the other side of each tile that you pick up, there is usually either something bad's going to happen, or you have a special power that you can use. So for example, one of them might be you get to move a shark, or you get to put in a new boat, something like that. The game is really mean, like super mean. If you really want to make enemies of people you love, play Survive with them. But I think it's in a lighthearted, fun kind of way. I mean, this is the kind of game that if you have had fights with your family or friends over games like Monopoly or Scrabble in the past, this is going to be exactly like that again for you. So I don't mean to scare people away from this game. I think it's a lot of fun. But of all the games on this list that we're talking about here, it's probably the one most likely to cause fights. But it's so much fun. It's loads of fun. People always say they want to play again. It's not very long. It plays up to 4 people and usually takes about 40 minutes, 45 minutes or thereabouts. And I've played this game a few times where people have immediately wanted to play it again. Usually out of revenge, but sometimes just because they had so much fun. So that's number 5, Survive Escape from Atlantis. A really good game. Number 4 is something that I think might be familiar to a lot of people, even newbies. It's Catan, previously known as Settlers of Catan. It's a classic game. It came out in 1995, I believe, and it's credited with being one of the first games to kind of bring on this new age of hobby board games. It's responsible for taking a lot of German designed Euro games and trading games over to the UK and America and other markets, and one of the games that kind of gave board games a big boost back when the time was right. Yeah, a lot of people know this game already, but very briefly, it's a trading game. You put down settlements and cities, you roll dice to get stuff. People can move a robber onto your tiles to block you and steal your cards. You can trading like wool and wood, grain and that sort of stuff, bricks, and ore. There's largest army, longest road. There's a lot going on actually in this game, but for some reason it's so elegantly done, and people kind of get the whole I need this to build that to get more to win kind of loop. It's such a simple simple core loop to a game, but it's just done so very well. The game relies pretty heavily on players having a similar kind of experience level. That's the one downside to the game. Now, I think if you have a veteran Catan player play against somebody new, if they're really going for the win, they're probably going to crush the other guys. There's a certain kind of experience curve there. But what I would say to that is maybe just don't be a jerk when you're playing with new people, because the game is pretty fun. I haven't played it a lot over the last few years. I think that might be because it's one of the first games I played. I think Carcassonne and Catan were the two games that really got me back into games, back in the early 2000s, and Catan is just such an attractive looking, and it's a very addictive game. I remember playing it in college and playing it in a lunch break. It's short enough to get it in an hour for sure with 4 players, and wanting to skip class to play it again because it was so much fun. And I think a lot of new players feel that way about this game. It's one of those oh my god, this is what board games are kind of games. Yeah, it's really, really good. Even to this day, it's still a fun game. It gets a little bit of hate from like board game snobs these days, but I think they're just wrong. It's such an elegant game. Even it's 25 years old now, and yeah, it's really fun. So check this game out. If you've never played it before, absolutely play it. And if you're looking for something to play with absolute noobs, this is one of the best ones on the list to do that with. So that's Catan, number 4. Number 3 on our list is something that is a bit of a hidden gem, I think. It's a 2-player card game called Jaipur. That's spelled Jaipur, which is a place in India. It's a 2-player game. It's a card game. It's beautifully done. It's got great artwork and lovely round token chip things. It's a game about trading stuff, like I think it's like riches and silks and all this sort of stuff. It's a very colourful game with very simple rules. There's 3 rounds. Each round, the player's trying to get the most points. You get points for making sets. You're getting sets of like crystals and sets of silk and sets of stuff like this. And the higher the set that you bank, you also get a bonus chip depending on how much of a set you've got. So like if you drop in 5 of something, you're going to get a lot of extra bonus points. Players are taking these camel cards, which are kind of like not part of your hand. You've got a hand limit of, I think it's like 6 or 7 cards, but you can have as many camels as you want, and you can trade in camels and cards a little bit more. So it's kind of like having 2 hands. It's a very simple game. It's really, really simple. I think after one play, anybody can be a match for anybody in this game. To there's a few subtle little strategy things that you can figure out, like whoever has the most camels gets bonus points, and usually the person who has the most camels has the most flexibility. You don't really want to be having no camels and no options for what you can do in your turn. But once you learn that, and you will learn that in the first time you play it, it's in my opinion the ultimate head-to-head two-player card game. It's certainly in the gateway space. Jaipur is a fantastic game, and it's one that I don't hear a lot about, and I don't understand why. But I highly recommend it. Everybody here who hasn't played it before, if you're a veteran or a noob, give it a go. It's really good. Okay, and that moves us on to number 2. Before I reveal number 2 and number 1, I just want to say that these two games are probably going to be obvious to people who know a lot about gateway games and board games. And any other given day, number 2 could be number 1, number 1 could be number 2. Number 2 for me is Pandemic. It is a cooperative game. Usually when I bring this out with new people, they're absolutely baffled by the idea that you're actually playing as a team against the game. So what this game is, it's a game where the world is at risk from 4 different viruses, and these viruses are spreading across different continents and cities and on the planet. And what you're doing is you're trying to work together to travel the right paths around the world, removing diseases as you go, trying to find cures, and you win the game by curing all 4 diseases. You do this by collecting cards. You need to get a certain number of cards in each color. I think it's 4 or 5. And if one player has all of those, they can bank them at a research station to cure the disease. Each player has a certain number of actions per turn, and you can work together to swap cards. You can heal faster with certain characters like the medic. Other ones allow you to move a different person's pawn from one space to the other. The game really encourages talking and learning together and working together. There's a lot of surprises in the deck. You know, it can be really tough sometimes to contain a particular virus or disease. When outbreaks happen, they spread faster. When epidemics happen, you add more diseases to the board. It can be a little stressful at first, but it's so much fun. This game plays pretty well with 2 and 3, but it's really good with 4. Yeah, Pandemic, it's a fantastic game. This game has kind of exploded in recent years. Like, there's so many different versions of it. I highly recommend the standard regular Pandemic. It's such an elegant design, Matt Leacock's masterpiece. In the last couple of years, they've released Pandemic Legacy 1 and 2, which are incredible games, but until you've played the base Pandemic, I wouldn't go near those, certainly not with new players. Pandemic on its own is just brilliant game, and that's our number 2. And the number 1, which may not be a surprise to a lot of people because it's a very popular game, it's the absolute smash hit Spiel des Jahres winner for 2004, Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is a classic. It's super easy to teach. It's kind of like an advanced version of Rummy. You're trying to collect a certain number of cards of certain colors and certain types. But the difference here is that you've got a board and you're trying to put down trains. The trains are going down linking cities on a map, and you're trying to match certain cities together based on the tickets that you have to complete. Ticket to Ride is a beautiful game. It's very simple. It's very infectious. It's quite an intuitive design, and it's super addictive. New players get it. They get that trains go from one place to another. They get that this color means this type of card. Kids get it really easily. It's super good. Like, it's just really good. I have never failed to have fun with this game with somebody who's not played a lot of board games before. It can be really competitive between new players and experienced players very quickly, even as early as the first game. If you've played this game 100 times, after you've taught somebody new how to play it, they have as much chance as you winning this game right away. It's really just such a really well balanced and fun game. There's a great mix of luck and strategy and forward planning, and it's just a really, really fun game. Ticket to Ride, it's definitely the best gateway game that I've ever found, and it continues to be a super hit even with kids. So there you go, number one top game for new board gamers is Ticket to Ride. And while we're talking about new gamers, I figured I would quickly mention 3 games that I play a lot with my kids, who are 7 and 4 at the moment. Kids games can range from really, really boring for adults but really fun for kids, to really confusing for kids and fun for adults. But these ones are right in the middle. And the first one is Hey That's My Fish. It's about cute penguins trying to eat fish. Very simple game. You move a penguin, you take a tile, the other person moves a penguin, they take a tile. Whoever has the most fish at the end of the game is the winner. It can be a little bit mean with really it can be really mean when adults play together, but if you're playing with kids, after the first couple of rounds, everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's trying to get the most fish. It's loads of fun. It's a really, really amazing little game. It comes in lots of different forms. Try and get it. It's pretty cheap usually. It's a really good game, and it's not just for kids. You can play it with adults. Hey, That's My Fish. The second one is King of Tokyo. This is another really popular game. It's by Richard Garfield of Magic the Gathering fame. This game is basically kind of a version of Yahtzee, you know, the game where you roll dice and you can re-roll a certain number of them. But it's a kind of a cartoony Godzilla in Tokyo kind of game. Kids love the monsters, they love the big chunky dice, they understand set collecting after 3 rolls of a dice. They know that numbers are good for points, claws are good for fighting. It's a really cool game, check it out. And the last one I want to mention that is good with kids is Forbidden Island. Now this is very similar to Pandemic, which we spoke about earlier, in that you're working as a team, you have a certain number of actions, you're trying to collect a certain amount of things before you escape the island that's about to sink. And looking at this one, it has ages 10 and up on the box, but I played this with a 4-year-old and he gets it really well. And it's so much fun working together. This beautiful production, these lovely trophies that you got to collect in the game are absolutely incredible looking, and they suck the kids right in. They're like, oh my god, I want to get that fire thing, I want to get the lion, I want to get the chalice. And it's a really beautiful kind of segue game for getting people from one game into a more difficult game. So Forbidden Island can lead to Pandemic, and so on and so on and so on. It's really, really simple, but it's just really fun. So Forbidden Island. So I recommend those 3 games if you're playing with kids, young kids. That's Hey That's My Fish, King of Tokyo, and Forbidden Island. So yeah, there you go. So the next time you're thinking of starting up a lunchtime game group in work, or trying to have a family game night without the misery of Monopoly or the pressure of Pictionary or, you know, Scrabble, try one of these games and I think you'll have a good time. So yeah, there you go. Welcome to the Vortex segment. This is something a little different, a bit off topic. I like to do where we close out the show with a recommendation in something outside of games. Typically it's going to be something in geek culture like movies or TV or books or video games, something like that. I call it the Vortex because there's so much pop culture stuff these days that it's hard to keep track of it all. And what I'd like to do is just give the odd recommendation of something to check out that you might enjoy. So today the first one I'd like to talk about is the Netflix show Black Mirror. If you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend you give it a try. It's an anthology show where each episode has different characters and settings. It's its own self-contained story. It's kind of like the old Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits, you know, that kind of thing, but very modern. Not in a kind of, it's not in a cheesy kind of show. Like, it's often quite dark, very mature storyline. The recurring theme of the show is that each story has something to do with technology and how science, computers, gadgets, all that sort of thing are becoming more prominent throughout our lives as time goes by. The show's into its 4th season now, with plans for a 5th in the future as far as I know. I've watched pretty much all the episodes, just a couple left, and most of them have been super, like, really good, really good episodes. Hits, very few misses. The first episode sets the tone of the show quite well. It's a little shocking, but the quality ramps up pretty quickly after that. The second episode is significantly better, and yeah, it leads you down a rabbit hole that you may not want to go down after all. It kind of leads you in a way where you kind of expect the worst in people, but in a really entertaining and really it draws you in. It really draws you in. You can't keep your eyes off it. It's a great show. There's some funny moments in there. There's even a few happy endings, but for the most part, it's a bit of a cautionary tale. But I think it'll appeal to people of the nerd culture type, you know, even if sometimes it can be a little unsettling. Some of the episodes are quite dark, so a word of warning there. My favourite episodes are the 15 Million Merits, White Bear, and San Junipero. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, give it a shot. Yeah, so there you go, a recommendation, something different. Black Mirror on Netflix. Okay, that takes us to the end of our first podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed listening along, and if you have, I'd like you to jump into the comment section on YouTube if you're watching there, or rate us on whatever podcast thing you're listening on, and please, in the comments, suggest your own favourite gateway game. I'd love to hear what people have had a lot of success with when introducing new players to games. What was the game that got you into games yourself? Was it Settlers of Catan? Was it Carcassonne? Was it one of the games I mentioned on this list? Was it something completely different? Let us know. So yeah, come back next time and we'll talk about games that have hit the table recently at Rulebreaker HQ. We've played a lot of new stuff here. We are going to recommend some other board game podcasts for you to try, and we're going to recommend a series of books in the Vortex segment. So until then, thank you very much and goodbye.